We are happy to see you all, at least via on Zoom. Let me introduce myself briefly. I am Associate Professor Dr. Serap Durmuş Öztürk from Karadeniz Technical University, Department of Architecture, and also the member of the Livenarch Organizing Committee. I'm opening the cold design session with 5 presenters with their presentation topics. Our first presentation topic is Over Other Spaces Over Plasticity by Zeynep SADIKLAR and BEŞGEN from Karadeniz Technical University. Welcome, Zeynep Hocam. The second presentation topic is Discovering Another Language, Walking in the City by Nilsu, ALTUNOK and Pelin ÇEBİ from Istanbul Technical University. Welcome, Nilsu Hocam and Pelin Hocam. Third presentation topic is An Autopsy of Truth in Design Process, Post-Truth Era and Other Architectures by Serkan HATIPOİLU and Ruşen YAMAÇLI from Eskişehir Technical University. Welcome, Serkan Hocam. Fourth presentation topic is Remote Design for a Better Life, Popular Housing on the Outskirts of Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro by Gustavo Fudaba CURCIO and Alessandra Prata SHIMOMURA from University Sao Paulo. Welcome, Gustavo Fudaba Hocam. And the last presentation topic is Alteration of House in Turkey under the Construction of Modern Family and Childhood by Öykü Su SEZEN from Abdullah Gül University. Welcome, Öykü Hocam. After these 5 presentations, we have a discussion part. We will receive your contributions from Q&A tab below on your Zoom screen and over our YouTube channel. Also, I want to remember that we are streaming live on YouTube now. Let's go one by one and then we'll discuss all of the papers. Dear Zeynep Hocam, I give floor to you.
Today, as in the history, architecture is in search of ideal spaces that meet the needs and the test of the day. Thanks to computer technology, today we have the opportunity to see many possibilities in a short time. One of the avant-garde styles, parametric design, allows us to have a lot of alternatives of design, depending on several parameters. Thus, parametricism carries an unpredictable potential for plasticity of spaces. So Patrick Schumacher's concept of parametricism and autopoiesis, which shape current discourses and design, and the potential of the sub-concept associated with them, creating a space plasticity, is discussed here. In art and architecture, plastic is an adjective used for the process, dimensional and animated quality of form. This quality, which is more defined as plastic form or plasticity, defines the depth, the three-dimensional formation in space, or the diversity given for the mass such as volumes, fullness, the three-dimensionality of the forms, as in sculpture. In addition, it is possible to encounter different meanings of plastic. The words seen in the last column of the table are the synonyms of plastic meanings in the first column. The concept of plasticity is the quality or state of being plastic. Plasticity of the interiors depends on the qualities of the elements which compose it. Plasticity can be achieved by function, mass, surface, time, light, color, material, depth, motion, and etc. Therefore, the answer to what constitutes the other space has to be solved. By looking at the space proposed by Schumacher's architectural autopoiesis theory and parametricism manifesto, then it will be possible to talk about the plasticity of other spaces. The concept autopoiesis was first introduced within biology by the evolutionary biologists Humberto Maturana and Francisco Varela in their book, Autopoiesis and Cognition, The Realization of the Living, in 1972. They define the concept as follows. An autopoietic machine continuously generates and specifies its own organization through its operation as a system of production of its own components. One of the lexical meaning of autopoiesis is self-creation or self-organization. Another meaning is the property of a living system, such as a bacterial cell or a multicellular organism, that allow it to maintain and renew itself by regulating its composition and conserving its boundaries. It was Patrick Schumacher who brought the concept of autopoiesis into architecture. According to Schumacher, the concept of autopoiesis refers to the overall discursive self-making of architecture. This is a continuous historical process and, to remain effective, it continues to require new theoretical efforts at each stage of its ongoing evolution. In 2011, he published his thesis in his book titled The Autopoiesis of Architecture. While the theory of architectural autopoiesis theorizes buildings and spaces within and around them as a crucial type of architectural communication, it also creates its own vocabulary. Today, as can be expected from autopoietic architecture, the words are very fluid and interchangeable. Schumacher gives concept of space as an example for one of these alterations. The concept of space was the conceptual mainspring of modernism. This has now been superseded by the concept of field as one of the conceptual mainsprings of parametricism. While space is conceived as empty and isotropic, fields are full as a field with a fluid medium. Liquids can be thinkable as radiating waves, laminar flows, and spiraling eddies in motion. Liquidity and motion are controlled and computed by computers. With the help of computers, numerous options are obtained. The concept of field offers alternative form of organization and orientation. A swarm of birds or a shoal of fish are helpful analogies to make sense of the dynamic and fluid field concept. If the flock is considered as a whole single body consisting of many parts, the form of the body will depend on the parts. Also, the shape of the body is non-isotropic and performs unpredictable motions. Dense crowds of people moving around create temporary architectural fields. This creation is sudden, variable, and flexible. Interior spaces such as airports, offices, exhibition halls, which are exposed to high population density, have many other subparameters apart from the human factor. Controlling the whole from the parts introduces parametricism. So what is parametricism? Parametricism means that all elements of architecture can be formed depending on the variable. According to Schumacher, parametricism is also an autopoiesis. By the means of parameters, the system is not just controlled, but also changed, transformed, organized from the smallest part to the whole. Depending on the parameters, it contains infinite forms and allows innovations. Through parametric design, complex forms and processes become uncomplicated. Curved, folded, differentiated, pliant, crooked, malleable, pliable, adaptive forms are produced. Schumacher presented his Parametricism Manifesto at the 2008 Venice Biennale. He believes that parametricity is architecture's answer to the important technological and socio-economic transformation of the world society brought by the information age. The concept of space has lost its formal significance recently. It is no longer discussed on the elements which limit it as it used to be. The concept of space has been replaced by the concept of field, so the parameters of space have also changed. Motion is an important parameter in field. It creates, defines, expands, and changes the field. To briefly sum up, other spaces are now called as fields. Other spaces have a plastic design and production process. Other spaces consist of parameters from the part to the whole. Other spaces are complex and computational structures. Other spaces are numerous options formed by the various parameters. Other spaces are fluid and non-isotropic and depends on the motion of crowds. To achieve space plasticity, users are significant parameters, so space plasticity relies on parameters. Other spaces are autopoietic systems, which creates and controls itself. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Zeynep Hocam, for your presentation. And now, dear Nilsu and Pelin Hocam, the stage is yours.
Hello, I'm Nilsu. I will present to you the proceeding I prepared with Associate Professor Pelin ÇEBİ within the scope of the 7th Livenarch Congress of Livable Environments and Architecture. First of all, I would like to say that I am very pleased to be among you and I feel very lucky. Also, I wish all of us a pleasant Congress process. The title of our proceeding is Discovering Another Language Walking in the City. This paper proceeds from the idea that the critical special practices which establish environments for new kinds of relationships to emerge between body and the surroundings of the body are alternative ways of understanding and establishing a dialogue with the city. In this context, the paper focuses on critical everyday practices, which have performative and explorative aspects, and differentiates itself from the common literature by approaching to the walking act critically and pursuing temporary, perceptual, and experiential potentials of understanding and narrating the city through the other. The aim of this paper is to investigate and discuss other spatial data about city, people, and movements in order to increase spatial awareness to city by the help of critical practices. By that way, revealing other languages which are provided by acts and movements of the body in the city becomes feasible. Here, other languages phrase is used as a metaphor which grounds on semiotics. Language is not only made up of talking or text. Indeed, many activities in the world can be interpreted as some kind of language, some kind of message transmission. Therefore, it is restrictive to say that there is just one way to comprehend the language and its relationship with architecture. If the bodily experience of one's movement becomes a pulpit for dispersing through world and matter and at the same time constitutes the dialect between subject and space, how can body establish another language with movement and acts that it articulates into this movement while performing it? The question was answered by portraying the walking act as a critical everyday life activity, discussing it on a theoretical basis, looking at different walking styles or walkers, and then conducting a case study. To Jane Rendell, walking as an everyday life activity is also a critical special practice because there are possibilities of new kind of relationships to emerge between subjects and objects in architectural design while investigated spaces that are in transformation and encountering with social cases. Throughout this paper, there are two main acts which constitute criticality. One of them is walking in the city, and the other one is representation of the walk, namely mapping of the walk. The relationship between them is rooted in American philosopher and gender theorist Judith Butler's concept of performativity, the Sartre's walking in the city concept, Petrescu's definition of being in the world as something to walk offers, and Carreri's futurist city concept. To portray the act of walking as a critical special practice, various walks and walking styles that are considered and discussed in terms of criticism are dismantled. These are philosophers walking for thinking, flanneries, data excursions, surrealist deambulations, lettrist derive, and psychogeographical discoveries. Considering these walks, it became very important for this paper that while the philosopher walks prioritize introversion, the flaneur criticizes the city and the crowd. Data did the walking activity collectively for the first time. Surrealists chose any point on the map and walked. Lettrists drifted in the city, and psychogeographical maps were produced. With the dismantling of all these walks, the description of critical walking of this proceeding has been made. Another important part of the study was locating the critical walking case study, as the intention of the paper is to investigate and discuss other spatial data about city, people, and movements. It is outstanding to chase otherness in the city by the case study. At this juncture, with the help of Desarcho's traveling incarceration metaphor, Marmaray Line in Istanbul, which looks physically inside the city but remained outside the city because of its encapsulation into itself, and that is away from everyday walking practices, showed potential in terms of revealing another language by critical walking case study. Case study has conducted in a structure composed of three main layers. First layer is the surface of the mapping and is in a strong relationship with the context of the workplace. Second layer is composed of the extracts from the workplace, namely marks issues that are connected with others. Here, other corresponds to unconventional, disruptive, unfamiliar, out of context, unexpected, strange, contrasting. The third and final layer of the walking and mapping strategy is the combination of mapping. This layer is the state of bringing together the surface of the mapping and the extracts from the walked place with the occurrence of many actions, such as cutting, tearing, overlapping, subtracting, highlighting, expanding, explaining, erasing, outlining, and so on. When it came to the mapping, and the discussion of the mapping, highlighted issues were giant walls that carry the Marmaray Line much higher than the current level, expressing Marmaray Line as if it were put here from above. Historical station buildings remained unrelated to context, and the line is crashing the scale of the neighborhood. The mapping created is not a finished representation with sharp boundaries, unlike the architectural design representations we are accustomed to. Since different recordings from another eye or even the same eye at different times can be made, the discussion can be approached from different points. Although mapping tries to produce criticism by making determinations on certain events, situations, or movements encountered during the walk, the coming together of these specific events, situations, and movements also prepares the ground for other discussions. So, in conclusion, critical walking methodology and its representation were brought forward as critical special practices which can be added to with the perspective of each new observer and enriched by the experiences of the same observer at different times. As an outcome of the case study, interpreting and criticizing the others of Marmaray Line with critical walking have enabled discussion that Marmaray Line has become a rational utopia that has been cut off from the neighborhood scale, harming pedestrian relations, breaking the bond between the old and the new, and sometimes breaking the visual and physical relations. Once and for all, looking at the others with the act of walking gives the body an open and unconventional awareness of the city to make us become inhabitants who can look more critically to our surroundings and reveal other languages provided by acts and movements of our body in the city. This was the end of our presentation. Thank you for paying attention and listening to me. I would also like to say that we are open for all questions.
Hi.
Thank you, Nilsu Hocam, for your presentation and extending the topic other through narrative scales with critical perspective. Thank you again. And now it's time to for Serkan Hocam. Your record is ready.
Hi, I'm Serkan HATIPOİLLU and I'm here to present our research about design process and post-truth theory. Post-truth has been shown its presence in the literature in the early 2000s. However, it was required popularity through the increase of 2000% used in the term in the Oxford Dictionary in 2016. And its definition is relating to circumstances in which people respond more to feelings and beliefs than to facts. It was frequently mentioned in the discussions about the 2016 US presidential elections and the UK Brexit referendum. As a recent example, 5G connection has been blamed for the spread of coronavirus. It has aroused some echoes on social media. such one and many theories are produced and circulated on social media regarding the emergence and infection of coronavirus. Moreover, in some cities of England, some people attempted to set on fire to cell towers as a response to this claim. I know, it looks nonsense, but examples with such impulsive action and weak content are more common for the media. So it should be noted that coming up conclusion quickly regarding post-truth through examining such examples with their weak foundations would be weak reasoning for the intellectual world. When the post-truth is understood only with elections and referendum that made it popular, it is perceived as if it has just a problematic and corruptive structure. The major literature offers suggestions for prevention and suppression of post-truth. However, there is another way. Starting with the acceptance of living in the post-truth era and examining the relations that are built up in this era. It allows us to frame the reflections of post-truth in a different comprehension. It is possible to find various studies at the intersection of education and post-truth. However, there has not been much discussions on specific design education and design process. In this study, we present the claims of Lawson, the author of How Designers Think, who analyzes the design process and the structure of the design activities. The objective of this research is to develop an introductory examination of what the design process can produce in post-truth cases, with statements of Lawson, of course, and to seek the productive potentials of post-truth. Design knowledge identifies itself by its ambiguity. Nature of design activity is grasped, uncertain, ambiguous, and exploratory by Lawson as well. Lawson developed a suggestion regarding the design process which identifies it as a negotiation of problem and solution. Moreover, it involves three activities: analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. But now, a critical source, truth, is lost. Even if the problem is clear enough, it is difficult to make them one total piece, as in the previous figure, because of non-compatible paths. Although it may seem purely chaotic at first, it would be chaotic when designers have just an ideal regarding truth. But please do not forget that we lost the ideal of truth. Now, we will review the examinations of Lawson as design problems, solutions, and process itself. Because of limited time for presentation, we made a selection of some of them. For detailed review, you can check our paper. Let's see what we have for design problems. Design problems cannot be comprehensively stated. It is difficult to compose a map of design process. They are inclined to change during the process. However, search for truth won't be one of those objectives anymore. It strengthens the difficulties of mapping the process. Designers need to find a way to oscillate among objectives without based on truth. It may facilitate to associate several objectives with totally different foundations. The statement of the design problem is still incomprehensible, but now they have not just ambiguous but also groundless objectives. Design problems require subjective interpretation. As we mentioned before, the examples of post-truth from different fields demonstrate sometimes that people respond much more to feelings and beliefs than to facts. Thus, subjective area for discernment of incidents and objects is expanded now. However, we need to find a novel way, novel verification system, not for the acceptance of truth, but for the problem to be considered valid in design practice. Let's move on design solutions. There are no optimal solutions to design problems. Without an optimal solution, there is still a motivation to search for truth. Hence, this statement points out the existence of various truths or solutions. In post-truth era, the only optimal thing is to be apathetic about truth. As long as the truth is no longer a significant part of the solution, any solution can be tested out and there is no need to seek the optimal one. Because designers don't hope to discover the universal truth with such an optimal solution. Design solutions are often holistic responses. Now, the ideal of wholeness is expired for the solutions because there is no need for it. This situation fosters free circulations of tiny parts of solutions in the post-truth universe. Still, possible integrations could come out, for this time with anonymous identities and deliberate ignorance of the truth. Mostly, there may be partial integrations without any claim of wholeness. Further, it is still difficult to dissect these integrations. Okay, the last theme is process. I mean design process. The process is endless. As a consequence of limitless different solutions and no comprehensive formulation of problems, we cannot expect a finite design process. Adding the groundlessness coming from the absence of truth, the infinite ongoing waves of design fits also in post-truth era. The designers may need to improve themselves to swim safely in this ocean. There is no infallibly correct process. Similar to current examples of post-truth, some parts of the design process may flare up much faster and fade out in a short time, parallel to relations of their circulation. In spite of quick changes, the designers should find a way to build up a little bit stable structures. Even if they can't do it, they need to avoid quick decisions as a reaction to quick changes. That's all for now. It was an introductory examination of what the design process can produce in post-truth cases and to seek the productive potentials of post-truth. Following this introduction, we need to develop in-depth review in different theories of design process and design knowledge. For the questions, you can send an email. And it would be great if you check my Instagram page, Contopunkta, for photographs, sketch, manifesto, design, and many punkta else. Thanks!
Thank you, Serkan Hocam, for your presentation and interesting topic. And now, dear Gustavo, the stage is yours.
Hi, dear colleagues from Livenarch. My name is Gustavo CURCIO. I'm professor and researcher at the University of Sao Paulo, Brazil. And together with Professor Alessandra SHIMOMURA, we are going to present the work Remote Design for a Better Life, Popular Housing on the Outskirts of Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. This work shows a reflection and a unique method to reflect about the quality of houses on the outskirts of Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. And this is an example of windows, typical windows of those self-constructions that we find on those regions, on the boards of the cities in Brazil, the mega cities in Brazil, including Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. Windows can have a very deep meaning. You can see on those pictures. It's through them that the morning sun enters the houses. Here we have another example of those constructions in Rio de Janeiro. And it's through those windows we connect the universe around us. This is an example of the skyline of one of the most known favelas from Brazil, Rocinha in Rio de Janeiro. We are going to discuss a little bit about the pandemic on the edge of the cities in Brazil. The effects of the pandemic in Brazilian favelas highlight historical issues of social segregation in the Brazilian urban environment. The inequality pushed under the rug of history is now showing itself in a stark way. We race against time to ensure human survival in this catastrophic scenario that we see in Brazil. Data from a survey carried out by Data Favela released on March show that 7 out of 10 families saw their family income fall in March. According to the report, 72% of mothers in the periphery feared with the COVID-19 pandemic that their homes would lack food. Here we can find some data extracted from the survey. 80% of families are surviving on less than half their income before the pandemic. We have other data here that we can discuss about a little bit in the future. This first picture shows a commerce that had reduced customer movement and changed opening and closing hours with the new coronavirus pandemic. This picture is from Pará, Brazil, in the north of the country. The context, open vulnerability. The similarity between the mass built at different scales of perception and different points in the city is remarkable throughout the entire territory of Sao Paulo, the largest city in Brazil. And this takes place inside and outside homes. And there may be another relationship between urbanity and the concepts of life and nature. This is an example of the typical skyline of the outskirts of Sao Paulo in Brazil. The panorama is similar on the outskirts of Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. We are going to tell you a little bit about the method we developed for the experiment that we will describe in the other slides that we will present here. This is the name of the project, Habitação Popular Retratos e Diagnósticos. The event promoted the reflection of community residents about the space and was divided into 3 blocks of 60 minutes each. This event was presented on the United Nations program of urbanism related to African and Brazilian cities, countries that speak Portuguese. Researchers from technology and visual programming from the University of Sao Paulo created an original strategy to develop a remote diagnosis for the homes of favela residents. This diagnosis helped to develop a list of suggestions for improvements considering thermoacoustic aspects performance of their homes. This is an unprecedented method. On October 3rd, a workshop was organized, planned by researchers Gustavo, CURCIO, me, and Professor Alessandra SHIMOMURA, authors of this presentation, which was part of the event UN Habitat, Post-COVID-19 Cities, Dialogues between Brazil and Lusophone Africa. Popular House, Portraits and Diagnosis in Communities Before and After COVID-19 was the title of this event. The first round had those steps here, and we are going to describe each one of them. Living on Favelas, Real Life on the Edge was the opening discussion between Dulcinea Pastrello and Bruno Figueiredo that live on the favelas, or in case of Dulcinea, works together with communities that live in favelas. The second round was a workshop about visual syntax that presented techniques, systemized techniques of photo shooting for people to reproduce and register their homes in a correct way to in order to promote easier ways of analyzing of those pictures from the thermoacoustics aspects. Those techniques from visual syntax were presented in Mexico during this Congreso Internacional sobre la Enseñanza y Aplicación de las Matemáticas at the University of Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, and this technique was detailed on this paper. So we are not going to discuss here because we don't have enough time for us to present the technique indeed. So here we have an example of the power of correct photos according to visual syntax for building space records. We have promoted thermoacoustics in favelas in the sense of analyzing those pictures that were shot by residents that live on favelas, and afterwards our team have analyzed those pictures and published the results on our web for them to have the examples of improvements they could do on their homes. So The perception of the interior spaces, environmental conditions requires understanding the climate context in which one is inserted, understanding the occupation of the space, identify a heat source that are presented and make part of analyzed spaces, the identification of constructive materials. Considering the environment of precarious dwellings in Brazil, mainly those located in slums, improving the thermal and acoustics performance of self-built houses can be an effective strategy for healthy spaces and population well-being. Public results. So the experiment was photo shooting those houses by their own residents, sending by WhatsApp, analyzing by architects, website publication, and finally the third round was the discussion of those public comments for people to understand how they could improve their houses with those diagnoses. Well, the diagnosis was divided on strong points and weak points. And those points were inserted on those pictures that were sent by the residents. Each one of the pictures was analyzed by our team. And those lessons were detailed and published on the website. Here we find a mosaic of examples of pictures that were sent during the workshop. Here we have the examples of the analyzed pictures. The technique that was developed was intended to be a replicable technique. The experience applied during the workshop with the stages of discussion between leaders, training for photographs, and subsequent analysis for the image by the architects was a replicable method to help improve the quality of life of Brazilians, mainly in the face of a context of vulnerability intensified by disastrous effects of the pandemic in Brazil. The group of researchers in visual design and thermoacoustic comfort intends to reapply the method developed and tested in other examples and samples of spaces in different Brazilian cities, always considering the context of social vulnerability. Here you can find the references. Thank you.
Thank you, Gustavo, for your interesting presentation. And now our last speaker, Öykü. Hocam, the stage is yours.
Hello everyone, my name is Öykü Su SEZEN and I'm a master's student in Abdullah Gül University. Today I'm going to present my research, Alteration of House in Turkey under the Construction of Family and Childhood. The research is a part of my master thesis, so before I start I would like to thank my thesis supervisor, Assistant Professor Ahmet Erdem Tozoğlu. In the presentation, I will first talk about the concept of modern childhood and the establishment of the nuclear family, and then I will explain how the houses had changed through these concepts. Centuries of Childhood by Philip Arias is generally seen as a pioneering work that reveals the concept of childhood may be different in history from the modern sense. According to him, in the Middle Ages, the child was seen as the younger of the adult. What was missing at that time was the awareness that the child is a being different from adults with unique characteristics and needs. However, in the age of enlightenment, the idea that the child is different from the adult began to develop. It is thought that John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau were influential in the formation of these ideas. John Locke opposed the church's idea of original sin and defined the child as tabula rasa. Rousseau also contributed to the change of thoughts about childhood by saying that the child is someone who needs to be educated. In this period, important developments were experienced in two areas as a result of rationalism and scientific developments. The need for educated people created modern educational institutions, and serious developments were seen in the field of health. Apart from this, with the effects of the nationalist movements, the child began to be seen as the feature of the state and society. So the upbringing and care of the child gained importance, and the idea of child-centered family began to emerge. In societies where the idea of child-centered family was established, crowded household dwellings of the past had changed. In pre-modern societies, households consisted of extended families and workers, but over time, households turned into smaller units and formed nuclear families. Developments such as increasing intimacy between husband and wife and giving importance to the child made the nuclear family and the house more private. The modernization practices started in the 19th century in the Ottoman Empire, and they changed the concept of childhood with similar developments to those in Europe. One of the most important of these practices was the modernization of education. With the law enacted in 1869, primary school was made compulsory regardless of gender, and modern educational institutions were opened. Modern schools were not very different in the content from the traditional ones, but they had used a modern and Western system. Innovations in the field of health also showed that the importance given to the child had increased. Institutions providing modern medical education and modern hospitals were built in order to prevent child death and improve child and mother health. During the second constitutional era of Ottoman Empire, the child became more important for the society and also the state. In this period, the child was seen as the future of the nation, and the nuclear family was stated as an ideal structure. Here, we see a drawing from a reading book. While painting the family consisting of mother, father, and child, we see them sitting on chairs at the table. In a sense, we can think that both the modern lifestyles and the idea of nuclear family have started to take place in society, and the house has begun to change in this context. The houses reflecting the modern lifestyle were the first apartments built in the late 19th century. These apartments, which were first preferred by non-Muslims, were also the choice of westernized Ottoman individuals. At the beginning of the 20th century, extended families had to leave their old wooden mansions, and they broke up and settled in apartments. Therefore, the apartment symbolized the collapse of the traditional family and mansion. The Republic of Turkey, which was established after the World War I, carried out a similar policy to the second constitutional period about family and the child. The child was expected to be healthy and well-educated. The house where the idealized nuclear family lived should also be modern in accordance with the ideology of the regime. The old wooden mansion, where large families lived, did not fit the spirit of the period. The modern dwelling should be a house where the nuclear family lives and allows socialization within the family. In the 1920s, it was said that making houses smaller now also affected the size of the family. And by the 1930s, the architects of the period had defined and designed modern residences for the modern society in parallel with the ideology of the Republic. Looking at the quotes from R7, it can be said that children also started to be considered in the design of the house. The newspaper clipping from 1932 also shows that the children's space had begun to settle in the dwelling. Here, the room was defined as a place where the child could study and spend time with his friends. It is important not only to have a room for the child in the house, but also to specify that it should be built in accordance with the child's needs and wishes. This shows us the perception that the child is a different individual from the adult began to settle. As a result, the modernization movements that started in the 19th century in Turkey changed the lifestyles and dwellings along with the family structure. The change in the perception of childhood in the society had also triggered the formation of children's spaces in houses. These changes did not occur in the same period for all classes of the society, but we see that a new way of thinking began to take place in society, especially at the beginning of the 20th century. And this was one of the major factors that led to the change of housing types in Turkey. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Öykü Hocam, for your presentation. Thank you very much again, all of you, for extending the conference, them, other architectures. And let me look at the Q&A part. Is there any question or comment? We can stay a couple of minutes for questions or comments. I have some questions, maybe for a provocation. The first one is to Zeynep Hocam.
Okay.
With the concept of space plasticity, do we mean the types of the spaces that we are not familiar with? For example, is parametric space also a plastic space? What do you think about it?
We take plasticity in space with its abilities like flexibility, pliant or ductile or foldable or malleable or adaptable or artificial or imitating in space.
Yes, thank you, Zeynep Hocam.
Thank you too.
And my other question is to Serkan Hocam. You called the reading of the truth as an autopsy. So we can say that your way of thinking about truth is deconstructive.
Kind of. Actually, it's also, you just need to discard the truth in the area and think the things again. I'm in the process, and I think this is really good practice to think about the future design practices.
Yes.
In this post-truth era. I don't know, maybe it won't be available for whole process, but it's really, I think it has really good potentials for, especially for the initial process. I mean, for instance, conceptual designs, etc.
Yes, I agree you, Serkan Hocam. Maybe you can study on about it for your further studies. Thank you for your answer. And our participants, presenters, do you have any questions or comments or an objection?
I'd like just to thank for the opportunity. For me, it's a great pleasure to represent South America here. It's a pity we cannot be in Istanbul today together, but maybe in the future.
Maybe.
For us, it's a very great pleasure to make those parallels. I see some links with the last presentation about the childhood. I think we could establish something together to do some parallels between our research. I'm nowadays working for those bridges between countries. We have some links with India, trying to draw those parallels between the outskirts of Brazilian cities and other cities around the globe. So it would be a very interesting opportunity if we could draw those parallels between Turkey and Brazil also, because I think we have some similarities, and it would be very nice. Thank you for the opportunity. It's a great pleasure to meet. I would like just to ask you about leaving your emails, just for us to be in contact. How can we have those contacts?
Our communication team will send an email about it.
Okay.
Gustavo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you. Now we complete the session. Thank you again for your valuable contributions to the Congress. We have a break now. You can take a tea or coffee or a refreshment for while we are waiting our last keynote speaker, Ioannis Palasma. Hope to meet you again in person, and bye.